first thing that is important.
Hello and welcome to NewsX World. We bring you some breaking visuals and some aerial shots. Show Nicolas Maduro, the ex-Venezuelan president, on his way to a court to face a judge in New York City. Of course, he has been scheduled to face charges of drug trafficking, among many others, after him and his wife were seized from their residence in the biggest US intervention in Latin America since 1989, after a huge tension from the US administration. Of course, we'll continue to bring you all the updates when it comes to that. And as you can see, this car is believed to contain the toppled Venezuelan leader, Nicolas Maduro. Maduro apparently is likely to argue that he has immunity from charges, because due to the fact, of course, much of the international community, along with the United Nations, questions the legality of this arrest. However, nonetheless, Donald Trump has flexed his muscles and he is present in New York, no doubt being in handcuffs, and is set to face a judge in Manhattan. And aerial shots here over the New York borough show the city ahead of Venezuelan ex-leader Nicolas Maduro's first court appearance in New York. Maduro was captured, of course, by US forces in a military raid that reportedly killed at least 32 Cubans. Maduro, of course, has been held in New York for the past couple of days now, and he faces charges related to drugs and weapons. The situation is raising questions about Venezuela's future, and US President Donald Trump said America is in charge now, signaling a hands-on approach to stabilizing the country. But back to America, of course. Maduro pictured on that jet being taken away from his residence in Caracas on the weekend. This has been the shocking story of 2026. Donald Trump shocking the world after Washington put and placed tensions on Nicolas Maduro. Okay, we're now joined by Andrew Latham, an international relations expert. He joins us live from Minneapolis. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. We're now showing those live visuals of what's believed to be Nicolas Maduro's convoy heading to face that judge in Manhattan. What can we expect from this trial? How long do we believe it will take? What further details can you give us? Has anything like this ever happened before? What more can you say?
Well, nothing quite like this has happened before. The Noriega case would be the closest, I think. Full-scale ground invasion of Panama back in '89. He was arrested, tried in the United States, served 20 years, pardon me, in the US, then was sent to France, tried there, served 10 years there, more or less, and then sent back to Panama and tried there. So there is precedent, in a sense, for this. It's likely, if that precedent holds, to be a fairly lengthy trial. I'm sure that Maduro will have capable defense lawyers, and the American legal system is nothing if not onerously fair. It can take a long time to get justice, but it's quite clear that he will not be allowed out on bail, for example. He's going to remain in custody. It remains to be seen. These charges were brought a long time ago. They were brought first in 2020 and then renewed or updated in this year. The process is unfolding as it should. The arrest, as it were, which was a little more than cops kicking in a door and grabbing a suspect.
Okay.
A little involved in that, but that's basically where we are.
Okay, Andrew, I do believe we're now seeing the toppled Venezuelan leader being escorted out of the car, of course, accompanied by many armed military personnel. There we are. We can see him in his handcuffs, walking slowly towards the New York courtroom. Of course, the leader is charged on narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices. Maduro surrounded by US forces there. It seems strange just over 48 hours ago when he was in Caracas, safely guarded by his security. We see Maduro there in a beige jumpsuit, being escorted by US troops, being led now into a helicopter, most likely headed towards that courtroom. And we're bringing you those visuals live from New York State. His wife does not seem to be accompanied with him. So of course we'll continue to bring you all the updates since it comes to that. Andrew, I want to come back to you, of course, as this helicopter carrying the toppled Venezuelan leader takes off to what is assumed to be his opening day of his trial. What do you expect the defense to argue here? As you've said, these charges against the Venezuelan leader have dated back years now and are extensive. However, what do you expect him to face a fair trial, and what will his defense say, do you think?
And as such has sovereign immunity. He is not subject to arbitrary arrest by American law enforcement, and that's the way in which the Trump administration has framed this operation. It was a law enforcement operation supported by the Department of War, not a military operation designed to topple the government altogether. And if that's the framing the Trump administration has taken, then it's entirely likely that Maduro's defense team will say, well, under international law, you are not allowed to do what you have just done, and therefore will ask for him to be released on his own recognizance immediately. I'm sure that the prosecution team will have a rebuttal, a comeback, but if I'm not a lawyer, but if I were, that would be the most obvious defense that I would mount, that this arrest was simply illegal.
Indeed, and of course this comes as in the same city the United Nations Security Council is set to examine the legality of this raid and of this abduction. Will it be a symbol case for the United Nations when it comes to the ruling of this? Donald Trump, by many of whom, is believed to have thrown out the international law rule book. How do you think people are going to be behaving in that UN HQ in the same city as Maduro faces his trial?
Good question. If the United Nations Security Council convenes and takes this up, here's the problem from the perspective of a lot of people is the United States has a veto. It's one of the permanent 5 members that has a unilateral veto. It can veto the proceedings even beginning, but if it allows that to happen, then there could be posturing and preening on the part of everybody making their case about this being a violation of international law. Sovereign states are in the business, first and foremost, of protecting the sovereignty of their sovereign state. And so they're going to make pronouncements to that effect. And some are going to be hostile towards the United States. China, for example, but also Iran, anybody who happens to be at that table who is hostile towards the United States is going to take the opportunity to say nasty things about the U.S. But at the end of the day, the United States will simply veto whatever comes out of that meeting if it's allowed to proceed, and that will be the end of that. That is, from the perspective of many people, the fatal flaw of the Security Council. It gives veto power to the 5 victors at the end of the Second World War, and does not give similar powers, by the way, to the largest country on earth, India, for example, or others who might have something important to say. So maybe this underscores the fact that the institutions that were built in 1944 and 45 and 46 are no longer fit for purpose in this world of great power competition, multipolarity, and Donald Trump.
Indeed. And if you're just joining us, viewers, we are seeing the helicopter take off with a man who is assumed to be Nicolas Maduro in a beige jumpsuit, and he is assumingly being taken to his courtroom in New York, where he will face the first day of what US Pam Bondi called unwavering American justice. He is, of course, set to face a New York judge on drug charges, alongside with others, including weapons charges. We're now showing you the visuals of that helicopter, believing to be carrying Maduro right now. Of course, domestically in the United States, Andrew, there has been opposition to this, particularly from Democrats. Congressional approval, the fact that there was no congressional approval has also been an issue that has been raised. We have seen some criticism from Republicans as well for this US operation. Donald Trump, of course, campaigning on not dragging America into forever wars, while Marco Rubio and Donald Trump have reiterated that this has not been a war. It has certainly raised eyebrows when it came to that. This trial, assumingly, is going to go on for months, like trials do pretty frequently. Of course, what we have here coming up at the end of this year is the US midterm elections. How do you expect this and other foreign intervention by Donald Trump to affect that?
Well, they're going to play very well with certain elements of his base, MAGA, but they're going to play poorly with other elements, because this does look like forever war, despite the way that Marco Rubio has framed it. And I can come back and talk about not calling this war, calling this something else, has a lot to do with the American constitutional and legal framework. But in any case, Trump was elected partly, or voted for by many people, because they were sick and tired of Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq and Taiwan and all of these claims that America has to be everywhere, always defending our interests. It simply grew tired with certain people. So this cuts against that. This looks not like a restraint strategy. This looks like the United States flexing its muscles and doing whatever it pleases, whenever it pleases, simply because it pleases. And so that's going to alienate part of his base. The bigger legal issue is constitutional. Only Congress can declare war. And so presidents have often used force in ways that look like war and have gone out of their way to say this is not war. The 1973 War Powers Resolution was meant to rein presidents in, and it says that, for example, presidents have to consult with Congress before using force. They have to get congressional approval after 60 days if there's boots on the ground or continuing action, those sorts of things. Donald Trump appears not to have done that. He appears not to have consulted with Congress. He still has 60 days, obviously, but and it was only justifiable if the threat was imminent, if it was urgent, and that simply was not the case here. Now, the problem is that Congress has been pushed before by presidents who have kind of stretched the War Powers Resolution, and Congress has never pushed back. Maybe this time they will put in place some real limits on executive authority, what the president can do with America's armed forces as commander-in-chief. If so, that would be a salutary and positive development in American constitutional law. But I have no reason to believe that's going to happen, because it's never happened when Obama did some of his acts of war, which weren't called war. Biden, right back to Nixon. Congress has never pushed back.
Indeed. Andrew, do stay with us. If you're just joining us, we're showing live visuals of a helicopter over the New York skyline containing what is believed to be Nicolas Maduro, the toppled Venezuelan leader arrested just a couple of days ago in the Venezuelan capital of Caracas. This helicopter seems to be landing now. We're going to wait and see if we catch a glimpse once again of what is believed to be the Venezuelan president, accompanied by many US guards, of course. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed. He is due in court in just a few hours' time to face charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and possession of machine guns, among other charges. Of course, we are seeing Maduro, what is believed to be him, get out of that helicopter. You can see there DEA agents escorting him to his trial in New York City. The individual wearing the orange shoes and the beige jumpsuit is believed to be Nicolas Maduro, the toppled Venezuelan president. Even just looked up at the camera there. Of course, Donald Trump has pledged that Maduro will face a fair trial in a New York courtroom for years-old charges. Now, of course, we are showing you visuals of both Maduro and his wife next to him there, what believed to be his wife. Significant visuals coming out there. Just a few days ago, Maduro was hidden in his mansion palace in Caracas, and now he is firmly on US soil, about to face a New York City judge. If you're just joining us, these are the live visuals coming out of New York just prior to what is believed to be Maduro's opening day in court. We can see him there being escorted by DEA agents and other federal American armed forces. A huge crowd of security there as he is being helped into an armored vehicle in New York City. We are currently, of course, talking about the arrest and seizure of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who have now been transferred to New York and are facing trial together. Okay, joining us now is Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. He joins us as well to discuss this developing and ongoing situation, which of course is at the top of every news bulletin around the world. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the program. A highly controversial operation by the United States. We are now seeing Maduro and his significant others' feet placed firmly on US soil and expected to face a US judge in the coming hours. How do you expect this to develop when it comes to his defense, and what do you have in sight for this trial?
Thank you very much, Thomas, for discussing this very important issue. It's a developing story. We will see lots of twists and turns as we go along. In terms of international law and its implementation, I think many questions will be raised for a long time. This sort of thing has rarely ever happened before, at least not for the last few centuries, except in one instance when the Panama leader, Manuel Noriega, was similarly abducted on narco charges, drug charges. And but that time what happened was, this was in the 90s. We didn't have so much of social media, we didn't have internet, we didn't have mobile phones. So the reactions were not so widespread. Today, with these images being flashed all over the world, it is being sort of thrown in your face. It is being etched in public memory. And a lot of countries have already objected to this, and a lot of more countries will continue to object to this for a long time. There will be very serious discussions on this aspect, because here is a president of a sovereign country who has been in power. He has, maybe used foul means to remain in power, but there are so many other dictators in the world who are doing that. In the Indian neighborhood, we have seen so many countries in our neighborhood. In Bangladesh, we see Yunus, who has been installed in power with the democratically elected Prime Minister being deposed. In Pakistan, we saw the majority front runner put in jail, Imran Khan, Prime Minister, and you have had rigged elections,
Yes,
and you have
yes.
now, yeah. So everywhere, all over the
Okay,
world, there are these very significant aspects. Secondly,
okay.
in terms of narco-terrorism and in terms of drug running, there are many other countries which have done much worse than what this Venezuela is doing or has done. So to pinpoint that and focus it on just this issue of
Okay,
narco-terrorism.
Ambassador
Then the
Pradeep.
third issue, yeah, which is
Apologies,
being also,
apologies. Do stay with us. Unfortunately, just addressing what's going on in front of us. If you're just joining us, Venezuelan president or toppled Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro is is in that armored vehicle on the way to a New York courtroom. Of course, he is expected to appear in front of new American justice. Of course, this is expected to be a long, complex legal process and not a quick trial. Of course, this follows his capture just a couple of days ago as he moves down the streets of Manhattan towards the courtroom. Ambassador Pradeep, please continue. Apologies for the interruption.
and the so lots of questions about international law are going to be raised continuously in terms of these charges were leveled in a US court and he was indicted in a US court. There is no international sanction beyond the US. Secondly, his wife, Celia, was picked up also along with him without any charges. She was arrested and the charges were raised on her after she was brought to the US.
Okay.
So that again is a very, great question of justice, of natural justice, whether you can go around and arrest anybody without any charges whatsoever against her, and then bring her and then put the
Okay.
charges against her. So there are going to be a lot of questions which are going to be raised. Depends on how much of legal support that Maduro gets.
Okay.
Because if he gets some good quality lawyers and attorneys and people who will defend his case, then it's going to be a very difficult issue for the US and it's going to put a very difficult face all over the world. Thirdly, the domestic aspects also are very important in terms of the powers of the
Okay.
Congress and the
Ambassador.
powers of the President.
Indeed, Ambassador Kapoor. Apologies. I just want to get Andrew Latham's input on that. The arrest of Maduro's wife, along with him. Obviously, we have seen other Venezuelan heads, officials indicted along with Maduro, but of course, Maduro and his wife are the only ones on American soil in US custody right now. What can we expect for his wife and also the other individuals who have federal indictments under US law still in Venezuela?
Well, it all depends on the broader political context here. There are more than rumors, stories now beginning to circulate that this was in fact a palace coup carried out by the United States, but on behalf of other factions within the regime in Caracas. And the Rodriguez faction won and engineered the removal of the Maduro faction. And if that's the case, and that's just speculation, as the ambassador said, there's lots of twists and turns coming. We don't know the full story yet. But if that's part of the equation here, then of course you're going to have to remove Maduro's wife, because you can't leave behind anybody who could claim the mantle of the Maduro leadership, of the Maduro faction of that regime. So if that's the case, it's not surprising. Otherwise, though, more mainstream, his wife has been an influential player in Venezuelan politics, both in the legislature and obviously over the dinner table talking to her husband. And it's hardly surprising that she would be both indicted. And I think there were indictments going back before she was picked up, but that's something that somebody will have to fact check. That she is facing similar charges, conspiracy, related narco trafficking charges, etc. So It's on one hand, it's a bit surprising. You don't usually treat couples this way. On the other hand, if she is a player of one sort or another, then it's hardly surprising that she would be picked up as well. If I were being really charitable, I would say this was a humanitarian gesture on the part of the Trump administration to make sure that this couple wasn't split. But I'm not in a very charitable mood this morning.
If you're just joining us once again, we're showing you live visuals along with previous images of Maduro being taken into custody at in the US courtroom. Of course, this came after a huge large-scale military operation in the Venezuelan capital of Caracas, and both Maduro and his wife, as we can see there, being led into that armored vehicle from images from prior, have been taken now to US court. Both Maduro and his wife are expected to, as Pam Bondi put it, face the full scale of American justice. And of course, we'll continue to bring you all the updates in this story. And these charges go back years, and of course, US prosecutors have pursued these since 2020. Earlier tied to the Cartel de los Soles allegations, an interesting topic, and the US government calls the Cartel de los Soles a foreign terrorist organization connected to Maduro's regime. If you look at the indictment, it cites that organization. Some even go to as far, some critics of the Trump administration even critique its existence, the Cartel de los Soles, but yet again it is in Maduro's indictment. Ambassador Kapoor, I want to bring you in once again. During this is obviously shaken the United Nations, and the UN Security Council is debating the legality of the US raid. Does this show a fundamental flaw when it comes to the United Nations, that the US can veto any formal action when it comes to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro?
Well, indeed, it raises lots of questions about, the implementation of the UN Charter also, which guarantees the basic sovereign rights of every country. So it's going to be a debate about how effective the UN has been or can be in such situations going ahead in the future, and whether you need a new organization in place of the UN, because if it is failing on so many fronts and is not able to, basically carry out its basic charter requirements also. So it does show that the UN itself is under question. And also one more point which I want to mention besides his wife is that now they have issued indictments against his son also as a threat to Maduro, that his son can also be picked up from Venezuela if the couple does not cooperate here. And the indictment against his wife was not at all announced or known, or it was in a sealed this thing cover in the UN New York court, and only after she landed in US soil was it suddenly said that, oh, she is also under indictment. But there was no such word prior to her arrest. So I think there are a lot of questions of legality. There are a lot of questions of international law. The entire basis and premise of international law is being turned upside down, in the sense that the statement which is being made currently is that if I have the firepower, if I have the might, if I have the weapons, if I have the capacity, then might is right, and I frame the rules. The rule of law, the rule of order, the Westphalian system of states, which was again a Western narrative and a Western creation for the last few hundred years, is now slowly frittering away on the edges, and soon it'll fritter away more towards the core also, because if nation states are going to be violated in this way, and the ones who are the real culprits, and if you see which is the countries which are doing the maximum amount of drug running in the country, in the world, and some of the countries which come up on the top names which have caused the maximum number of deaths in the US is China, with its fentanyl drugs being sent here. And
Yes.
the US is powerless to take any action against China. And now it is threatening action against Cuba and Colombia and Mexico and others. So And the third aspect which I see here, which is very important for global relations as the world moves ahead, is that the US is sort of declaring that our zone of influence is now going to be limited to the Western Hemisphere, to the Monroe Doctrine. That means the other countries are free to do what they want in their zones of influence or in their zones of interest. So if China has to take over Taiwan, US is almost saying that we are not going to be interfering in that process. So this is, falling apart of the rule of law as we knew it till today, and the future going ahead is going to be even more difficult. Thank you.
Indeed. Yeah. And Andrew KP Leung joins us, I believe. He's a China strategist. He's joining us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this has caused something of a geopolitical earthquake. Some supporting this move, but many not. China being among those that has claimed that this is a breach of international law, and they have demanded for Maduro's release. They join countries like Brazil, Mexico, Uruguay, Colombia, among others. What precedent does this action set in Beijing's eyes, do you believe?
Well, I think that Beijing always treasures the United Nations Charter. But of course, that for example, over Ukraine, it puts China in a very delicate position because on the one hand, China has been linked with Russia's economy to the hip, although not forming a solid bloc, but nevertheless, the two countries are pushed together into some sort of a closer, not necessarily a bloc, but at least closer partnership. But on the other hand, Russia is now trampling on the United Nations Charter as well. So I think China is treading a very thin line. But I think on Taiwan, it is a great misunderstanding and make a great twisting of the logic, because Taiwan is regarded as part of China, is not even recognized by the United Nations as a country. I mean, the United Nations abides by the one China policy. And the second misunderstanding is that China somehow wants to take advantage of this to invade Taiwan. Now, I mean, this is a total misunderstanding because invasion over the Taiwan Strait is a dangerous trap because the waters are very treacherous. And then China's preference is peaceful navigation, following the age-honored Sun Tzu's art of war, winning without fighting. How it's going to be achieved? It's going to be achieved by military deterrence against any separatist movement. Secondly, the economic and diplomatic isolation. More and more, less and less countries recognize Taiwan as a country. And thirdly, people-to-people exchanges. The two peoples are increasingly intertwined through tourism, investment, business opportunities, you name it. So the momentum is being created towards a settlement. And that abides by Americans' policy, because the American policy is only opposing unilateral use of force. It always advocates the resolution of the Taiwan question through negotiation. And last but not least, United States remains maintaining the policy of not having a view on the future of Taiwan. So I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding there.
I'm going to stay with you, Andrew. Of course, China is by far the biggest buyer of Venezuelan oil. Venezuelan oil exports to China have been around 80 to 90% of Venezuela's total exports, with much of that crude going to Chinese refineries either directly or via intermediaries because of US sanctions. Donald Trump, of course, now saying that the US will run Venezuela. The US oil companies will come into the country, rebuild its infrastructure. What about the future of Venezuelan oil exports to Beijing?
Well, I think you forgot to mention the other part of President Trump's remarks. He also made it quite clear, only yesterday or the day before, that when the United States controls Venezuela's oil, he would make sure that the oil continue to supply its main customers. And of course, the biggest customer in the world is China. And then the second question, the second much misunderstood aspect of this relationship is that although in Venezuela has got the world's largest oil reserves, its total export is much less than its potential. And then the total, even though China is biggest customer, the amount of oil China purchases from Venezuela only accounts for 5%, not 50%, 5% only, because China buys a lot of the oil from Russia, from the Middle East, all the other countries. Those are only 5%, so it's not going to be the be-all and end-all kind of threat to China.
Andrew KP Leung, Andrew Latham, I just want to come back to you. Of course, inside Venezuela, Rodriguez has been sworn into power, named as interim president by Venezuela's Supreme Court. How do you expect it to play out now? There is seemingly a power vacuum that has been filled, business as usual in Venezuela. Donald Trump has said that Rodriguez is going to cooperate with the United States. Of course, with what Donald Trump says, a huge armada outside in the Caribbean. But she's publicly criticized the United States. Washington's action, what's next?
Well, it's important to point out, I think, that this American military operation merely decapitated the regime. It didn't change the regime. The regime remains in place. It's resilient. It's got a new, it's as if the United States president had a heart attack and died. Well, of course, the vice president would assume that office, and that's what's happened here. So leaving questions about intra-regime competition and conflict aside for the moment, because I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know what's going on there. What I do know is this: if the Rodriguez administration bends to the will of Donald Trump, and that will, by the way, has almost nothing to do with drug trafficking. It has to do almost nothing to do with oil, although that's a thing. It's got to do with excluding Russia, China, and Iran from the Western Hemisphere. The so-called Monroe Doctrine, which is the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine. That's what this is all about. It's got almost nothing to do, because as the ambassador pointed out, the amount of drugs that come from Venezuela into the United States is dwarfed by the amount of drugs that comes in through Mexico, for example. And I don't think we're going to see American military operations against Mexico anytime soon. If Rodriguez bends to Trump's will and opens up the oil industry for American investment, desperately needed investment, whether it's Chinese or American, because it's all falling apart, and takes steps to minimize the influence and the connections with China and Russia and Iran, then the Trump administration will say, it's business as usual, carry on. You're doing our work. Why would we put boots on the ground if you're doing our work for us? It remains to be seen, though, whether Rodriguez and the faction that she represents and leads is in a position to deliver that. First of all, if it wants to deliver that to the United States, and second of all, if it's in a position to deliver that. If not, I think, and Trump has been clear about this, he's willing to ramp up the pressure on her as well. He said something to the effect that something worse than what happened to Maduro could happen to her if she doesn't go along with this. So it remains to be seen how much skating room, or to use an Americanism, wiggle room she has, and whether she can deliver what Trump wants. If yes, carry on. If no, stay tuned.
Indeed. I want to thank our guests, Andrew Latham, Andrew K. P. Leung, and Ambassador Kapoor for joining us here on NewsX World on that discussion. Of course, we'll continue to bring you all the updates coming out of that situation in the United States and in Venezuela as it develops. But for now, thank you very much for joining us.